Ah, hello there. I must say, you look terrible. Smell no better. But then we were literally in the belly of the beast. And we both lived to sing the songs. Well, I sang them at least. Right then. I think that's the last of the salt water out of my cloak. I don't know about you, but my garbs are in tatters. Fortunately, the amulet has brought us to just the right place to find some fitting fashion. Welcome to the Brass Coast, and Sirok, the city of 1,000 sails. The bazaars here are filled with sights, scents, and sounds gathered from across the whole of the Empire and beyond. What we can't buy here is probably not worth having. How interesting. The amulet is pointing towards this strange-looking fellow here. No cutting for taste, I suppose?
Oi! You there! Don't drag your soggy feet all over my fine rugs. Can't you see we're closed?
But it's the middle of the day.
And that one there! The one with the gormless look on their face. Standing there right on my rug. Now piss off! Whatever you've got offence, I don't want any part of it.
Come now, sir. Don't let the appearance of my bedraggled friend deceive you. We are here on business.
Yeah? What kind of business?
Why, the most prosperous kind, of course.
But by the virtues! Is that amulet what I think it is?
The one and the same.
Oh my days! And it brought you to me!
It would appear so, though I can't say why.
Ha! Ha! It brought you to me! Oh, take that, Mum. Take that, Dad. Take that past me. Right then, well, don't stand there shivering away on these cheap old rugs. Come inside and I'll have a look for what we need. Come on, come on.
What exactly is it we need?
Crystal, my boy. But not just any crystal. A very special crystal. Ow! Hey, well, it's a very special crystal indeed. Used to focus its power. Now, where did I put it?
Well, by the looks of it, we may be waiting for quite some time.
I know it's here somewhere.
So, while we wait, why didn't I continue with the noobs at last?
Hi everyone, it's Ian from the LARP Noobs. Before we start the episode, I just want to let you all know that this one was recorded over Skype. As a result, there are some quirks in the audio that I've done my best to try and clean up. There are also some bits I had to cut because sound quality just dropped a little bit too low. Nonetheless, overall the conversation I think is really valuable and really worthwhile. I was able to talk to a friend of ours called Robert, who we had met at LARP. It was a really enjoyable conversation about crafting. I'd really like to do some more episodes about crafting going into the future as well, so maybe watch this space and we'll see how it develops. Anyway, I'll stop waffling and please enjoy the episode. A little treat for everybody. A friend of ours that we met at LARP called Robert has agreed to do an interview with me about crafting, and well, I just really wanted to start with, I guess, your background in both LARP and crafting.
I mean, I guess probably like a lot of people, I started with Dungeons and Dragons. That sort of got me into the sort of fantasy genres.
Mm-hmm.
That was a long time ago, way back in the early 80s. And yeah, and at the time, me and a group of friends, we sort of looked into LARP, but at the time there wasn't anything really sort of nearby us. But we did find a thing called Task Force, which was essentially, it was like a paintball site, but they did like a Cold War sort of long weekend scenarios. Where it was really good. I mean, you didn't have a character as such, but you could choose the roles of things like a medic or a sniper, and you had a team together. And
sure. So it's like scenarios.
Yeah, but it was over a whole weekend. It wasn't just a chase the flag type thing. And there were like scientists you had to find and rescue, and it wasn't just shoot each other. You had to interrogate prisoners and all this sort of thing. It was really interesting, and I guess that's what sort of gave me the bug for it. And it was a very long time ago. And then I guess family and children and work and all that sort of thing gets in the way. And although I sort of kept a toe in the role playing, I didn't really, and I moved to Wales as well, so
It's difficult to manage it around everything, right?
yeah, it is. And it wasn't really until my kids, well, became, virtually grown up, really, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
that they sort of discovered all my Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And my youngest one, Daniel, they said like, "Oh, what's all this stuff?" And I was trying to explain it to him, and then he started watching. I think it was, I forget the name of the guys now, but they were really popular, and they started doing Empire videos.
Oh, is that the
Tabletop Weekly? Yeah, Tabletop
Tabletop
Weekly.
Weekly of Mark Humes
Yeah,
and Hat Films? Yeah.
and yes, that's the one. And Daniel was looking. Oh, wow, that sounds really good. Can we
Hmm.
go? And so I said, yeah, we'll give it a go. And so we all went as a family.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting part of things. It was really interesting to see you guys going as a family, and that must be such a warm experience to be able to share that with your son in a way. It was really enjoyable to sit with you guys and have you all sit around the table with us, and quite different from going with your mates in a way.
Yeah, I guess it probably would be. I mean, Susan, who's my wife,
Yeah.
she came too. She's never really been into the role playing or the fantasy games or the Warhammer. But what she wanted out of it really was the fact that it's all the family together. And as the
Mm,
boys were growing up, my two oldest sons don't live at home anymore. She saw it as
right.
an opportunity for us all to do something together
Yeah.
that that we wanted to do. And she thought, "Oh, I'll tag along and do it." And actually, she sort of quite enjoyed it. So, yeah, it was a good experience.
I think that's one of the things about LARP that really kind of strikes is just how people maybe have it from the outside have that whole negative view that all the people who do it must be very introverted people, and they have the same sort of view of people who do like D&D and stuff like that. But actually, like very extroverted people kind of do it, and it's also just I mean, the whole hobby is about communication, right? Ultimately, it's all about expressing yourself and meeting people and engaging
Yeah.
in the hobby, right? And that's how you get the most reward from it. And that's the fun part.
Hmm.
Is I mean, like the fighting and stuff is all good fun as well, but it's such a good way of meeting people and having fun and sharing in a community, and just it's like nothing else you'll ever do.
I totally agree. From the first time that I went, it was like I was hooked,
Yeah.
without a doubt. And so was Daniel. Daniel was like, "Oh, well, Dad, we've
Mm.
got to come back. We've got to
Yeah.
do this again." And I
Yeah.
was like, we were driving in the car on the way home, and we were like, "Yeah, we've got to do this again." And Susan was like, "Yeah, it was all right." But she enjoyed certain things, I think. And this is the other thing. There's so much going on. I mean, I enjoyed the fighting. Daniel, at the time on his first event, he wasn't old enough to go fighting, so he did the academy, and he loved the academy. And Susan went to, well, and I went as well. We went to see a play in one of the league theatres,
Okay.
and that was probably one of the highlights of our first event. And it was just like, wow, how good is this? It's like, you can go to a theatre,
Yeah.
or you can go drinking, or you can go, there's 101 things that you can do, but particularly Empire. And, you don't have to be, a physical sort of person who's spend their day fighting all the time. You can do anything really.
Yeah, and I think
And
there's that whole thing of, as you say, like you can do something that you do in the real world, like go to the theatre or go to the pub or all this kind of stuff, but all of a sudden you're doing it, but with this kind of added layer that's on top of it of, you're your character doing it. And
mm,
that in a weird way, that kind of social construct of
mm,
you having this other layer of role play on top of what is fundamentally a very normal activity, going to the
yeah,
theatre or going to the pub or something, or just walking around. Basically,
yeah.
it takes on another level that sort of the immersion of it
Mm.
actually brings you together with people.
So I've actually been thinking about this a little bit, and I've sort of, I'm sure somebody's sort of thought of this as well before, but I think particularly with Empire, there's sort of two levels. Well, there's probably lots of levels, but there's two levels that I would sort of call it. So there's the stuff that I do, which I would say is like sort of skating the surface.
Hmm.
So I go, I role play, okay. I admit that my character is probably about 75% me, and and I just enjoy the event. I role play a lot more when I'm fighting. I feel that I become my character more. When I'm relaxed and out of that situation, it sort of drifts more into me. And then there's the sort of other level, which I sort of call deep game, which is where people are so invested in what they're doing that they sometimes don't. What's the word I'm looking for? But they sometimes don't see the different levels, and they're so immersed in this one little thing that they're doing. It could be anything. It could be like doing some sort of historical research, or it could be trying to get a vote through in the synod, and the whole weekend will revolve around that. And they're so busy doing that one thing that before you know it, it's time out on Sunday and you're done. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I mean, it's a great thing, but I'm much more of a sort of, well, I'll see what happens, and we'll turn up and we'll wander about, and hey, who's this guy? And someone will come up, and eventually they go, hey, we need you to go and do this thing, and we go, oh, okay, off we go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's the same for you, but like I find that when you first go, of course, you don't know anything, you don't know anyone. And you're largely just walking around, essentially being yourself, making very, very basic role play kind of moves ever so often. Like, oh, I don't like this, or my character likes that, essentially. But when you those first few hooks, in a sense, just like in D&D, right? You get those kind of storyline hooks that actually sort of draw you into the story a bit. Or more importantly, you put yourself into something, so you put yourself out, which is always the best thing. The classic just say yes and just kind of engage with an element of the game. When you do that, stuff opens up, and then you can find the role play for that thing comes a bit easier. But I think, like you, I mean, my role play and my character and all of that is like super sort of surface level at the moment, because I'm still a LARP noob, and to be honest with you, 90% of the time I'd say I'm very, very role play light still, even now. And I'm happy with that right now, and I'm happy where I am. And also it's being mindful of like my own sort of competency and my own confidence, more importantly, right? Like you have to be careful with yourself to a certain extent, because like you don't want to walk away from a situation feeling like, oh, I just sort of ruined it for everybody or whatever.
Yeah.
And over time, I think you get a bit more thick-skinned to that, because you start being more comfortable with who you are.
Well, that's interesting, actually. I mean, I'm actually on my second character now. So my first character, I'm on my second character. So my first character, who was called Glyn, was a guide. Okay. And I made that character, well, completely blind. I'd never been to Empire before, and I'd always liked in D&D. I always liked playing the cleric or the the sort of support type character. I thought, oh, this will be great. I can get it. Gives me something straight away to get into, like the synod and meeting in the synod and all that sort of business.
Sure.
And I enjoyed the couple of events I did as Glyn, but it was really, really hard to get into in the first instance, because there's so much to know about the religious game that I think as a starting character, it was like, right, okay, I should really be knowing these things. Yeah. My character should know these things. I haven't got a clue, and that's not to say that all the people I spoke to weren't really sort of magnanimous, and sort of Dave alluded to one of this actually on one of the other episodes of the podcast. I don't want to play a character where I don't know. I want to know everything that character understands, and playing a guide was really, really tough, because I didn't know enough, essentially. So
I think, sorry.
Yeah, when Glyn died, which was great, by the way, I was tortured to death by the Druge. It was fantastic. It was one of the highlights of that event, to be quite honest with you. I sort of took the opportunity and went, actually, do you know what have I enjoyed? Well, I've enjoyed the fighting. I've enjoyed what haven't I enjoyed? I haven't really enjoyed the meetings. Right, okay. So now I know a little bit about what it's all about, and I think, well, right, okay. So my second character, which is the one I play now, which is Caro, is a Thorn. Is an old Thorn, and in the twilight of his years, and but I changed it. So my new character fits a lot better with the position that I'm in, which is I know a bit, I know enough as this character. People don't stare at me thinking, oh, what's this guy on about? And I think that as I go on, it might be at some point later on that I will perhaps go back and have another go at the priest game
I completely
when
agree.
I know more.
Yeah, and I think that there's that whole thing that this is where I think people who come from pen and paper role playing maybe don't. You make a bit of an error in a sense because, and I did the same. You're used to the DM, or you as the DM, because I'm normally the DM in these kind of things. Mm-hmm. You're used to that person sort of getting you to, in a sense, to make the history check roll, and then they tell you the stuff, and then you can then you can depart that to your party, as it were.
Yeah.
Or when I was a dungeon master, I used to prep people before the session with things that they'll know, things that will be pertinent to what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So they would kind of have, if you like, cue cards. Essentially, it would tell them, oh, okay, I know about the tomb of whatever, and these are all the details I know. But in LARP, of course, you don't have that. It's all live, you know.
You've either got to know it or you don't know it. And
exactly. If you're playing a guy who's supposed to have all of this knowledge and you don't, the disconnect and the way it makes not necessarily the person you're talking to, but it's all about your own confidence ultimately a lot of the time. How it makes you feel is tough. It's tough. It's a tough thing to reconcile.
I think it does depend on who you are, though. So, I mean, I've noticed now. I've been there. I've been at Empire for like about 18 months or so now, and I've noticed like some new players that are coming in, and my God, they hit the ground running.
Yeah, they do.
And it's like, how do you do that? They literally come in. They've got great kit, and it's like from beat one, they're at standing and go, "Hi, I'm a new player," and the next thing you know, they're like captain of a skirmish, or it's like, wow. How do they? I mean, I'm not jealous. I'm in admiration of their
totally.
Their skill of role playing and being able to get into that sort of stuff, which I guess sort of brings us on to why I decided to start crafting stuff.
Yeah, and that's really what I wanted to get into. Was you said that ultimately through crafting that gave you a way of essentially engaging more with the hobby.
Yeah, so I actually thought I was a really sort of confident person. I mean, I'm in my day job, I'm a service manager for one of the major retailers, and my day-to-day job is talking to people and talking to customers, and I thought, this is easy. I do this almost for a living, talking to people. But actually, particularly at the start, when I was playing Glyn the priest, I found it really hard to talk to people about stuff, because a lot of people were, especially when I started and the sort of influx of new players hadn't really kicked off yet. There was a lot of really experienced people who knew absolutely everything about everything, and to be fair, it was quite intimidating.
Oh, it is. I think that's a big aspect, actually. The intimidation of walking up to you can kind of tell, right? You get a vibe for people who have more experience, right? And the intimidation of walking up to them, and of course, everyone by and large is very friendly, very warm and welcoming, and wants you to talk to them. Yeah. But the confidence in yourself to suddenly put this stuff forward, like. You attach a level of ego, I guess, to your own character, which is a bit like sort of handing a novel to someone, right? It kind of suddenly feels like you're sort of saying, "Oh, look over this novel I've written and tell me what you think." It's like that's a bit different from you doing what is in my day job, which is telling people about a map department in a library, right? Again, I communicate a lot in my job, but it's very, very different from essentially putting a little bit of my own self forward in that kind of way.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, I just want to say on the point of, the more established players, don't get me wrong, every person I did eventually get the courage to speak to were absolutely great. And there was, I'm not going to mention him because he might get embarrassed, but there was one guy particularly that it's probably only a 2-minute conversation with him, but it was the thing that actually changed me from thinking, I don't know whether I'm going to come back to. Yeah, absolutely. I need to come back because this guy, obviously, he'd been around the block. He was part of the Navarre, and he was one of the main, I would say, the main leaders, characters, and the fact that he took time to speak to me about stuff And he didn't belittle me. He nodded sagely when I was talking about stuff and pronouncing things wrongly, and and he was like,
true.
he didn't correct me.
Mhm.
And then I think, out of character later on, we had a little chat as well, and it was like, oh, you pronounced that wrong. Oh, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
And it was those sort of things. Actually, thought, do you know what? It's not so bad. But the reason I started crafting, so I do sort of have a bit of a background in sort of building stuff, I guess. I've done a lot of 40k Warhammer 40k stuff, and I've built a lot of so I've built a lot of tables.
Yeah.
And layouts and buildings, and I've worked with foam and wood and all sorts of things over the years.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
And I looked at the weapons that people had and that were in the shops and things, and I thought, you know what, I could probably give that a go. And also something that I do, which I don't think many people do. I mean, I've actually not come across anybody else doing it. I'm sure there are, but I will sell weapons in the field for in-character money.
And that was a really interesting part, actually, when you walked up to us and were offering to sell this item. And it was really cool little interaction, actually. That was really good fun. And I can see with what you're saying why you kind of involved that in part of your character.
Yeah, I mean, my character, a bit of his background is he runs a forge in Miaran, and he brings weapons, and he's a weaponsmith, and he brings a few items every summit to get a little bit of coin to do whatever it is that he seems to be wanting to do this particular time. But the reason I did it, and the reason that because look, making weapons isn't cheap. It's not cheap. You could probably, if you want to make in-character money on its own, you're probably better off making, brewing some beer or making cookies,
definitely,
or doing some cupcakes, or
alcohol seems to be the way, right?
Yeah, anything like that, and you'll probably make more money, because someone will quite happily pay 5 rings for a cupcake. But when you say, well, I want 5 thrones for this sword, and they're like, ooh, wow, because as 5 thrones is a lot of money, especially for a starting character.
Yeah.
But what I found was the fact that I was doing it and actually selling weapons for in-game character money meant that I got a lot of people interested, a lot of people talking to me. And then in the downtime, I post a few pictures on the Facebook and things, and people will go, "Oh, that's cool," or "How do you do that?" And actually, that's how I sort of met you guys in the first
the shield
place.
you posted up.
Yeah.
So you made this beautiful isometric shield, which is so Navarre, and you just made this shield that was just really striking, really captured what, to me, I would expect a shield of the nation to look like. And I was just like, man, that's incredible. And at the time I was thinking of making a shield. I don't quite have the balls that you have to make weapons.
Yeah, you've done your own armor, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've concentrated more on making armor and costume.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting, and ultimately combined together, we could probably kit someone out fully.
we could. No problem.
So I went down the route of making armor, but I asked you about making shields, and you post up these videos that are really useful, because there's not actually a lot of stuff that really looks into it.
That was your friend Dave. He's a very persuasive man. So I think we had a little bit of a conversation, and Dave asked me, wow, this is interesting. Well, I think it was Dave and yourself, and he said, look, this is interesting stuff. How do you do it? And it's a lot easier to show someone rather than try and type it all out. So in the end, I sort of took the plunge and made a couple of videos. And I don't know whether I'm going to make any more, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because they were tough to do, and it's not nowhere in my skill set, I'm afraid. But I did them. They turned out okay. And I mean, one of the problems I had when I started crafting LARP weapons was the lack of instructional stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
There was a lot of videos, but the vast majority of them were American. And they have a sort of different outlook on a lot of LARPs with their weaponry, and that's this sort of boffer type weapons.
Exactly.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I mean, the way that they go is that they're incredibly safe, and you can really whack something really hard with those things, and you're just not going to get hurt. But they don't look very good.
I completely agree. And in fact, actually, I don't know about you, but having a weapon, especially, I think, even more so than the armor and all that kind of stuff, but having a weapon somehow gives your character so much identity, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, totally agree.
my bow and my sword like sum up my character almost more than all the rest of my outfit, because it's that thing. In real life, I don't own a, well, I mean, I do own swords, but I don't sort of, it's just not the same, right? I don't walk around and I wear a sword, more importantly,
No.
right? But my character wears a sword, and
Yeah.
that's a big part of who he is. And you've made wonderful things, like you made this beautiful axe and all these kind of really sort of some stunning swords as well, actually, I've got to say. And all of these things, essentially, like they're almost like characters encapsulated for people ready to pick up in a way. And that's the really interesting thing when you go to a weapon shop as well, and you're browsing around, like each one of these is a character ready to be picked off the shelf, really, because when you pick up that weapon and that's the right weapon, that can really form the character in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I did look at. I mean, on my first event, obviously, I hadn't made any weapons at that point, and I was, we were doing it on a real budget, and I think I picked up a really small axe and a buckler.
Yeah.
I think the axe was like about 30 quid, and the buckler was about the same, and it was enough to get me going. But I looked at them, and when I got home, I think it was really, I looked at them and thought, I can do that. How wrong I was, because obviously the first things that I tried to make, pretty much, to be honest with you, fell apart. And then sort of going back to the videos that were out there on YouTube. I mean, apart from the American ones, the European ones, obviously a lot of them weren't in English. And then there was a couple that were, and I think there's a guy, I think he's called Larp Wright. I think he was German, and his stuff was what I sort of based off to begin with. The problem was he used German products, and I couldn't find them in this country, a lot of it.
Exactly, yeah.
So it was really hard to sort of source it all together. But once I'd got sort of going, I mean, the first thing I made was like a dagger, and I used like a camping mat.
Right.
And used a bit of camping mat and just sort of glue from Do It All or whatever it was. Wix, I think it was. I bought a little bottle of latex from eBay, and then the Itaflex I actually got from a local builder's supplier.
Okay.
And I gave it, and the core was an old tent pole.
Okay,
So,
right, sure.
Yeah.
Super ghetto, but in a way.
Oh yeah. It was almost literally what I could find lying about the house. And I built this dagger, and I looked at it and I thought, well, it looks like the weapons that I've seen, but I gave it a bit of a wave around. I whacked a few things with it, and before you knew it, it was literally falling apart, and the tip had poked through the end. It's all right, okay.
But I think that's a big important part about when you're getting into crafting. You've kind of got to go in with, well, you don't have to. I didn't either. I went in thinking, okay, I'm going to make something. But I think it's probably helpful to know that the first thing you make is probably going to be absolute tosh. And the second thing you make is just going to be incrementally a bit better. You know what I mean? But actually, like, so I'm working on some Lamlar armor now, and that's been a long process. But, I can already, all the things I've learned building up to this point are what have given me the confidence to do it, and also have given me the skills to do it. And it's just about taking the time and being mindful of the fact, like any hobby and any I guess any creative thing, the first stuff you make is going to be pretty shit, and that's okay, right? That's completely okay. If the first things you make are just tests, essentially. Yeah.
I mean, I recently did another little video which I've actually put on the YouTube channel now. So if anyone wants to watch it, they can. But I posted it to the Navarre page originally, which is just sort of going through some of the old stuff that I've made and the progress that I've made along the way. And I did it really for myself, just to say, hey, I've come from this really quite piece of rubbish to sort of where I am now.
No, I watched it. I loved it. I think it's a really good message about actually what, in a sense, the spirit of the crafting is actually, and how rewarding it can be.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like you're making armor and I do weapons. It doesn't even need to be that, and it doesn't even need to be like a physical thing in my mind. If you want to write in-game poetry or an in-game song, if that's where your talent lies, or even if it doesn't, but you want to give it a go,
Yeah.
then do it. Have a go.
Yeah.
Your first poem will probably be rubbish, but your fifth poem might be that one that everybody's sitting around the campfire and going, "Oh my God, that's so amazing," But if you don't give it a go, you'll never know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's so much in LARP. By and large, I'm sure there are some exceptions, but pretty much everyone I've met, they want you to succeed. They want to enjoy the thing that you're doing, and that most people are really receptive to any effort you put in. Is so richly rewarded. It's just having the confidence to stand up and do it. And it's funny to say, even knowing that people are so generous with their praise and generous with their sort of receptiveness to what you do, it still is difficult to get the confidence to do something. And every time I do something, that I'm battling through, in a sense, my own sort of confidence. But it's getting easier every time. And every time I go, I'm getting more used to essentially dropping into that aspect of myself, which has the confidence to drive forward. And I just think that's experience. And there's just essentially, as you said, some people are more naturally gifted to go that way. And for others like me, it just takes time. And it's, I think this time during the Long Dark next year, I'll probably still be role-playing fairly light and crafting, just because it just helps so much.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that there's lots of different people, and lots of people I think come to LARP for lots of different reasons. But there's one thing I think that sort of runs through everything: a desire of people, I would say particularly at Empire, who want to make it the best that they possibly can. And whether that is they're making something, whatever it is that they want to make it the best they can. If they're going to role play, they want to make it the best that they can. And that's something I'm not really seeing in other environments. You don't. I find that no one comes to Empire and is like, meh, whatever.
Yeah, you don't get people coming just to shoot people down. And if you do, I've not met those people. Everybody who talks about my kit tells me how good my kit is. Everyone who talks about my character tells me how good my character is. And I'm sure there are some people out there who probably look at my stuff and think it's rubbish, or judge my character and think it's rubbish. They either keep it to themselves or whatever. But it doesn't matter. For my perception of a lot of these things is that people are just so generous. And I use that term a lot, but I think people are just really generous in their desire to have you succeed, and you just find that naturally engenders onto you. I go there, and if someone talks to me, I just want them to be comfortable. I want to have fun, and them to have fun too, and it just naturally happens that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've not really done many other LARPs. I mean, the last LARPs I did was a very long time ago, in the 80s, and it was quite different. It was quite different then. It was very much young teenage boys, men, really. There were very few females involved, and it was viewed very differently, I think, as a very much a sort of nerdy teenage boy type activity. But the way things happen now, you go to Empire and it's easily a 50-50 split on men and women. And actually, I would probably say there's probably more women at the events than men. I mean, I'm not sure. That's only anecdotal. And age groups as well. You'll have everything from little children up to people like myself who's crowding 50, and people are older than me.
It's such a diverse section of people, and I think what's also really cool is that there's no gating of anything from anyone. You know what I mean? Like, it's not one of these things where, someone walks up and down the line and sort of kicks you out the football team because you're a bit overweight or you're too short. No. Or there's none of that, right? It's just like, you want to be the guy who goes out and does the thing, then someone's willing to take you on that. The fantasy of it is fully accepted and I think fully rewarded as well. I mean, I've not done any other LARPs, so I can't speak for other LARPs, but I think Empire particularly is really... I think there's and Dave touched on it a little bit in the last podcast. There's definitely something to it, I think, in terms of the positivity and the almost mindfulness and good feeling, basically, gives people. It's such a positive experience that it feels like good mental health. I
would totally agree. My job's quite stressful, but for those sort of 3 or 4 days, my phone is off. It sits in the car. I don't look at it, and I am somewhere else. And it's fantastic. It's it can be really intense. Don't get me wrong. We can have, intense battle.
Definitely it can be. Yeah.
Yeah. You can be standing, 3 inches away from someone shouting in each other's faces, but it's not the same. It's restful and relaxing. Does that sound weird? But
no, I know it's hard to explain because you're doing something like, as you say, sometimes it's emotionally very sort of wrought and sometimes very, very raw in a way because you're playing certain things. I have to I've been inches from death multiple times, and it's, but because it's got that sort of LARP sort of glaze, if you like, on the whole thing, and because it's sort of separate from real life, and because I can kind of put myself somewhere where everyone wants me to succeed, and even if my character had died, there'd be someone there to make even that part of the experience awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean, I totally experienced that myself. When my first character died, some Druge torturers come up and chop my fingers off and eat them.
Sounds so good. You know what I mean? That's how I want to go. I want to go some way like that. You know what I mean? I want to I think it's
brilliant.
Yeah.
And I was there lying on the floor screaming, and I was miles away from you can see the fighting in the distance. I was miles away from the line. It was just like, I'm done here. But exactly, there can be like really traumatic things happen, but you come away, you pack your tent up on a Sunday, and it's like, wow, that was, you can't explain it really. It's really difficult.
No, it's can't. I think we do our best, I think, in the podcast to try and give you a feeling and be as honest as we can about our experiences and stuff. But I think the way it affects you when you walk into it and you do it and you're in a situation, that's a very individual thing. But definitely. I just think I would just encourage someone to do it, because there's nothing in my life that I've ever done that is quite like LARP, and I don't think there's any substitute for it that I could find in any other hobby. It's such a unique thing that it can't be replicated, and the rewards for it are so high that I'm willing to put up with crazy mud at E1 and lack of sleep, someone in your tent snores, or all this kind of stuff. You're willing to be a bit smelly, all this kind of stuff that maybe in your average life you'd be like, oh man, this is just the recipe for what sounds like the worst time of your life. But it actually, like in LARP, it's just so fucking awesome.
You mentioned E1 at the beginning of the year, and I was thinking to myself, oh my god, that was awful. But actually, at the time, it was fine.
Yeah. The only bad part was cleaning the tent afterwards, to be perfectly honest with you. So I bought me and Dave bought this bell tent, which is basically the most expensive thing we have for LARP, right? And the kind of thing we rely on. And it's just like, I'm the guy who cleans it at the end of every event, and it's just like that whole part of it is literally the worst bit, right? Everything else, being cold, being whatever, you're so absorbed in the experience. Yeah, you just enjoy it, and it's just in terms of like crafting in general.
Yeah,
and kind of, I guess what's next for you, really? What kind of stuff do you think you want to try out?
Well, the first thing that the first sort of what next for me really was where the first thing I actually made for someone, where someone's asked me to make something for them. So that was a big difference. I'd made stuff and I'd either sold it for, in-game money, which is, to be honest with you, sold most of my stuff for that. Yeah. Or I sold a few bits and bobs for barbarian money, as it were, or a combination.
Because you've transitioned now, and this is another interesting thing. You've transitioned from being, if you like, a complete sort of self-creating kind of hobbyist into someone who's now taking, in a sense, I guess, requests and commissions. Yeah. You've kind of been able to take your hobby, if you like, and not necessarily make a business out of it, I suppose, but make something more of it. And that in itself must be quite rewarding to see.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm still doing, I've got a couple of swords that I've got, which I've earmarked for in-character money. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I'm building up a little sort of store of stuff that, hey, you'll be available at E1, guys. But it's going to be Caro, my character, selling the items for in-game money. But like I said, I mean, one of the guys, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, is Dave from the Ashbourne, who's asked me to make him a shield, and obviously a couple of other people. So where someone asks me to do something, which is biggest form of flattery that anyone can have, to be quite honest with you. In that case, I do have to say, well, look, I need the cash for it.
Yeah.
I can't do those sort of things for just in character money, and the reason being is that usually what people are asking for is quite complicated stuff. Takes a long time to do, and I'm not made of money, unfortunately.
Well, the actual, especially for weapons, but also for armor and stuff, and it's the actual materials are not cheap often.
Oh.
I mean, you can see how money can be made, but the efficiencies you need to make are hard to do.
I mean, no illusions that the stuff that I'm turning out, it's not as good as if you went to, one of the well-known LARP weapon manufacturers. You are going to get a better finish than what I can make.
I'll asterisk that with I think your stuff is very high quality, and especially visually very, very high quality. I think you might be right in terms of maybe ultimate durability, but I think you've really progressed even from what I've seen.
I have, but there's a sort of step that I haven't been able to do that obviously the manufacturers can, and I'm really very, very aware of it. And that's the actual finish. We're getting into technical stuff now, but it's the finish of the latex. So when you're actually doing a weapon, the manufacturers, as far as I'm aware, they spray the latex, which gives you a super, super smooth finish. So I don't have that facility. I mean, I might be able to purchase the equipment to do that in the future, but I think
though that you make stuff that has that kind of it's got that slightly pitted effect, which is obviously a natural process of how it's made. But you've made stuff quite wisely, I think, towards what your finish can create, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So the stuff that I tend to make is sort of Navarre centric weapons. If I was trying to make a fine Dornish blade, it would be a different thing altogether, because my accuracy and the finish that you would get, it just wouldn't be as good. When you're turning out 50 swords at a time, you can afford to, get the spray equipment and do that. When I'm making one weapon at a time, it's just not practical, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also, though, the great thing about what you do, though, is you kind of make up for all of that aspect of it by having those really nice personal characterizations and the personal touches, which obviously you can only get by someone, commissioning a blade off someone, or commissioning an axe off someone, or any other type of weapon or shield. I think that's where your stuff really shines.
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of the other guys do commissions as well. But I was speaking to someone who's asked me to do a sort of spear thing, and he'd been round, and I guess I was at the bottom of the list, but he'd been round to pretty much all the manufacturers, and a lot of them, there was either a waiting list, or they didn't have time, or they could do it, but it was going to be quite expensive to do. And whereas I'm doing literally one weapon at a time, I can pretty much say, I can do it, and my the price that I charge is considerably less than what you would pay for I would say a well-known make, as it were. But where I think I win over is the fact that I can design stuff exactly how you want it. I mean, with Dave's shield, I've done it down to the measure. I've measured his hand. He sent me hands.
Wow.
So he can get his grip is the right size for him.
Good.
I've done so the shield is to be held in the left hand. So if you're buying a shield off the shelf, it's got to be, they've got to be able to use it in both hands.
Yeah.
But because this is Dave's shield, he's going to be holding it in his left hand. So I could make it so it's designed to be held in the left hand.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It just looks so good. I'm so excited to see it on the field.
Yeah, hopefully, well, it will be done by E1. But it's about 3/4 done, I would say, at the moment as we're speaking. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it, and I guess the thing that I wouldn't enjoy would be having to churn out 20 scenes or look the same.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
not where I want to go. Yeah, I don't want to go there. What I actually want to do is, make interesting things for people, usually one-off things that are unique. Obviously, make my own stuff as well, and give that person something that is unique to their character. No one else will have a weapon or a shield or whatever it is that they wanted that is exactly like that on the field.
I think that's such a huge part, as I was saying before. Like the characterization that a weapon brings, and the characterization that a weapon that someone like you crafts brings, is so huge. Like for example, my sword is just one that I bought from a LARP convention. I love my sword because, of course, it's the first thing I ever bought. But it doesn't have the little Navarre touches, right? It doesn't have the fawns on it in any way. And the stuff that you make does. And of course, you can understand the big manufacturers, they can't afford to necessarily make tailored stuff for just Empire.
Well, exactly.
You know what I mean?
And they can't even more than that. They can't do. I mean, apart from orc stuff, I guess, but because orcs are pretty generic. Not saying sorry, orcs, so you're not generic, but you know what?
Let's call it more kind of brutish kind of weapons, right? They're almost like a theme of themselves, right?
Orcs, trolls. There's a theme of that type of weapon that in many LARPs is that will fit. But when you come to things like Empire and perhaps other LARPs as well, where they have factions, where there's like a look and a feel of a style. For example, great one is actually going back to the shields. So if you'll go and have a look on the wiki for the Navarre shields, it describes the Navarre shield as thin and fluted and barely wider than the wielder, I think is actually the phrase. And then you go into the shops that are usually in Empire, and they're all round. Well, not all, but the vast majority of the shields are sort of round Viking shields. Yeah. Because that's what generally people want. So if you want something, I mean, I'm only talking about Navarre here, but if you want something that is on brief, tricky to find.
It is tough to find something like that.
And the only way you're really going to do it, if you want it exactly how you want it, is either make it yourself or commission it. And to be quite honest with you, both of those ways are going to be potentially expensive because just starting off, if you're going to start off and make especially if it's going to be a full foam one, which is the sort of that Empire would prefer, is the full foam design. It's not going to be cheap in materials, and then it's obviously your time to do it.
And it's also that whole thing we said going in, that the first one you make's not going to work. So you're going to go down the whole thing of like, actually, it's probably going to be the second or the third thing you make. So you've almost got a cost for the second or third thing.
But I don't want to put anyone off from giving it a go, though. Equally, I mean, please have a go. I mean, I'm on the Empire Facebook pages. But if you want any advice, if you're going to give it a go, look me up.
Your videos are really good, actually. Like just in terms of, especially for people based, in the UK, looking to attend UK LARPs. I think, as you said, there isn't really anything like the videos that you've made, and essentially they're out there. So there's a lot of really good information that you have.
Now, they're very long.
They're very, but in essentially, even if you just go there and you skip to the bits where you say what products you use, right? That in itself is interesting information, and whether or not that will be relevant in 5 years, who knows? But it's there as an archive, and I think
and I think that it is a resource. It is there. The fact, and the other thing is, of course, I didn't do it in isolation. There were people who were already at Empire that do make their own weapons. And I took some advice from another guy in Navarre who gave me some really good advice and, sort of set me straight on a few things that I'd got wrong and probably saved me quite a bit of money, to be honest with you, by, saying, oh, no, you don't want to do that or and this sort of thing. And, I would recommend that you do that, whatever it is. I mean, especially if you're going to do like armor or weapons, take a little bit of advice. Don't do it just blind, as it were.
I mean, the first thing, I think in a sense we probably both did this to an extent. We both kind of, I imagine, did make the first thing we made a little bit blind.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe learn slightly from our mistakes. The first bit of armor I ever made it turned out being essentially a bit more like a chef's apron than a bit of armor. But I learned a lot through doing that. I was like, oh no, I can make this a lot better. And even now, like now when I'm wearing my armor, I'm like, oh, I know so many ways I could have done this better. But it's still usable, and it's got me through a whole year. You know.
Yeah, I loved your armor actually. I mean, I don't think we actually physically met at the time, but I think was it E3? We were both on a skirmish together.
Yeah.
And it was the one where they had to do the Dance of Navarre and Thorn, and we had all these.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was a really good one. And I remember sort of, clocking you then because you were an archer, and then you had to leave your bow behind because it was getting dark and you couldn't take
it.
but I do remember sort of clocking you then, and I thought actually, it was really cool. I really liked it.
Oh, thanks very much. The thing was, I think, when you're crafting, and I don't know how this relates to your kind of things that you've done, but my experience is I kind of prep the project with being a little bit aware of what my own limits maybe are and the things that I know that I can do. I'm confident I can do certain things, right? That I can take bits of aluminium, cut them to shape, drill holes in them, and pin them to a piece of leather, right? I'm confident I can do that. So with that in mind, I can then. It's only a few more steps, when you break it down into those small steps of the things you can do, the few things that maybe you need to read up on, or you need to get a tool for, or all of that kind of stuff. It's a bit easier, right, than if you just suddenly say, I'm going to go out there and make myself a full sort of steel set of plate armor, right? That would be a massive undertaking.
But sometimes you perhaps don't think like that logically, I guess it's like, I was like, I want a spear. And then I thought, how the heck am I going to do a spear? Rob, you better do a dagger first.
Yeah.
And
it turned out to be a really good move, right? Really good move to make that dagger, right? And that dagger has taught you a hell of a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, I did that, my first couple of daggers on the dining room table. Yeah. I didn't even get outside, because it was small enough to do. I could do it. And a lot of the techniques that I used did sort of translate over. Some of them didn't, I guess. And, I've used a different technique now for doing long weapons, which works really well. It's completely different. So if you do come across one of my early ones, and they are out there still, I actually came across a couple of my hammers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I came across.
That must be really rewarding to see some of your stuff out there in the world of Empire and stuff. That's cool.
I didn't even know who had them because actually my son, he went around selling a load of the weapons at E1, and then at E4 we were in the battle, and there was a young lady with one of my hammers.
Oh, so good. Yeah. That's awesome.
I did have a bit of a J.R. Hartley moment with it, mind, and I did say, "Excuse me, young lady, that was one of my hammers." She looked at me strangely, to be quite honest with you, and then we were back into the fight, and he was just like, yeah. It was one of the first things I ever made, properly. I mean, besides the things that fell apart, obviously.
Now that makes me want to I think that's a good idea. I think maybe I'll make a few things to pass off as well. I think, it's a nice idea actually, because that's something I haven't really done is made stuff to sort of hand out. I could make a few sort of braces and things like that. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think there's a big difference from me making something for me. Well, actually, it tended to be my boys because they always nicked the things I made. Going from just making stuff for me, and then seeing people using the stuff that I've made, and then from then on, people were saying, "Oh, I really like your shield, or I really like your hammer."
So good, dude.
Where did you get it? And then I say, "Well, actually, I made these myself." It's really, could you do me one, sort of thing? And it's like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And that's really rewarding. Although there is that element of pressure that I've found. Actually, so to sort of temper all that, when you're selling stuff for real money, barbarian money, whatever, there's a little bit of onus on you to make sure that what you are doing is obviously first and foremost safe. So that the whoever it is that's having it is going to be safe with it. Secondly, that it passes weapons check, because it's going to be absolutely no good to them whatsoever with if it doesn't do that. And then thirdly, there it lasts at least a season, and that's the three things when I make something now. Well, certainly not so much for myself, but I'm doing
Commissions,
I've had a couple. I have to make sure that those three things happen. I mean, look, I think people know that when they're paying, in the region of, well, I don't know, between 70 and 80 pound for a shield.
Yeah.
And you go to one of the shops and you're paying between 100 and 150 for a shield.
Yeah.
You know that what I'm doing is, I'm an amateur. I'm an enthusiastic amateur.
Yeah.
But still, they expect a sort of minimum. It needs to still do the job. It still needs to look the part. It still needs to hold together, and it still needs to pass weapons check. So that is a worry that every time I make something, until you actually get in the field and that thing that you made is in the hands of an official weapons check, you can think. You can think to yourself, yeah, that's fine, it'll pass. But I always have this little nagging doubt in my head. Is that a bit, or is that point just a little bit too off, or is that pommel a bit too hard, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you've done it enough now that maybe you've become more confident. Of course, you've done a lot more. And of course, you've made a few things that have passed weapon check and so on, where you've become to a level where at least you could see the glaring things that wouldn't pass and wouldn't make it.
Oh, yeah.
So you with that in mind, I get what you're saying. There is, I mean, when I make something, there's obviously with armor, it's a bit different because there's not necessarily the same safety levels unless you're going to start putting spikes and weird stuff on your armor, in which case don't do that.
But no, I mean, I've probably picked the hardest category of crafting, apart from actually, the
scariest one for sure. The scariest category for sure to take on.
Yeah.
Unless it's the one that could lose you the most money or the most time or the most effort. If it fails, I think weapons are the one.
Yeah, I mean, my worst nightmare is someone takes it away for an event, and then it's they buy it at E1 and they come back to me at E2, and it's like the tips poke through, and I've got to take it away and fix it, because basically the minute that, because my prices are really low and the costs are quite high per weapon, the minute that I have to repair anything is that money's gone. And I'm not doing this as a business. The reason, I don't know whether I already said this, but the reason that I charge real world money is basically to fund my event. It just means that, of course, don't forget there's essentially 5 of us in the family, and so
that ain't cheap.
Times your ticket price by 5. Because my 2 oldest sons are usually skint, and I end up paying for their ticket. You times that ticket price by 5, and all of a sudden,
that's a holiday, right? That's a holiday somewhere.
Well, that's it. It's like this is our holiday. Pretty much. So if I can sell a couple of commissions that sort of offset the ticket price a little bit,
it lightens the load, right?
Yeah, of course it does, and that's the only reason I'm doing it. I'm not doing it, to be, and I'm sure actually a lot of the manufacturers don't really do it for they do it. Of course, they do it for profit, but I think a lot of them, they all do it for the love of the game and the love of the crafting itself. You're never going to become a millionaire making light weapons.
I think there's levels to all of this stuff, isn't there? So there's essentially you're the step beyond where I am. I'm just making stuff for myself. You're making, if you like, you're just sort of starting into that realm of making commissions for people. There's that step beyond, which is, kind of, I guess, maybe a full-on sort of Etsy business or something. And then you kind of move from there into sort of obviously actual full-on businesses, and each of those steps have their own challenges and rewards, and
I mean, I probably wouldn't want to go any further than doing, because once you get up to the point where you've got a little stall, a little tent, and you're selling stuff, you've actually got to spend your event selling stuff.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, right now you can do it as part of your character, right? You can walk around, or your sons can walk around a bunch and stuff, and you sell stuff, and that's game, right? Every time you're selling something, it's game. And I think that's it was so good to have you come up to us while we were having a drink and we were having a campfire, and we're there sort of discerning your weapon. Obviously, we couldn't even begin to afford your weapon as well, which is the other whole part of it. But we didn't want to say we were so broke we couldn't afford it. We were all like, oh, it's kind of all right, But it's just as you say, like a media game, right? You made a situation where you could engage with us and we could share time together, and it was an experience that we could, and it doesn't always have to be like the massive battle or the moment that you save me or I save you. Like those little interactions are sometimes some of the funnest things. Like sitting in a pub with you and like having a laugh was just one of the best parts actually of the whole weekend in a way.
Really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that myself. I mean, my plan has worked. I took on doing the weapons in the first place to essentially make friends and influence people.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I ended up talking to you on this podcast is pretty much there we go. It's it's done the job that it was intended to. I never actually set out to sell any. And really, I mean, I thought I might get a few for in-character money, but I never certainly set out to do any commissions. Set out to and save myself a little bit of cash making some weapons and perhaps make a little bit of in-character money for my character. But that's sort of where it's led. I actually did it to get
enrich your own game, right? And
that's the whole point of it. I think maybe if I was perhaps doing it again, maybe I wouldn't have chosen weapons and maybe they'd gone down the cupcake route.
No, I don't know. I think it's very you, right? Like I think like you bring a lot of character to the whole thing as well, right? I remember you coming up to Dave and you were handing him the sword and you were saying, "Put it in your hands, sir. Take a feel of it and check the weight." And that you are as big a part of that. Obviously, it wasn't a transaction, but as big a part of that moment as the sword, right? But the sword is almost, as I say, like a social construct. It's a thing to sort of bring that moment together. And I think for you, that the going down the whole sword route, I think you sell it really well as both in terms of how you actually sell it, but also in terms of how you actually sell your character as part of that. I think is a really great success, and I think something that, as you say, you've succeeded, right? The thing that you set out to do, you succeeded in. I think it's really good.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The thing I set out to do, which was, to talk to people, meet people, that was my number one reason why I did it. That was a success.
Yeah.
Actually, it turns out that people quite like what I've done, and, it's gone to another sort of level, which is great. But if it hadn't, equally, I'd
that would be fine too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's that whole thing of getting into any of these things, and with the same reason you get into LARPing, right? You do it for yourself primarily, right? You do it for yourself and your friends and all that kind of stuff. But really, largely, it's for you and it's for your own game. Like you don't go into any of these things thinking, oh, I'm going to make. I mean, like this podcast, right? We didn't go thinking, oh, we're going to make this like a really, it's going to be explode and be this big thing or whatever. And not that it is, but like I'm just saying, we just did it because we thought it would be a fun thing to do, right?
Yeah.
It's that kind of honesty, I guess, of just trying to do everything you do with just the idea of this. It's fun and it's something that you want to do, and you're doing it with the right kind of intention.
Yeah.
And I think that the whole weapon crafting and crafting in general, I think that's just a really good way to approach it. Just start it off real simple for you.
Do something
and see where it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, Dave was making bracelets, which to sell for apple bobbing. That never happened, right? But he enjoyed it. He enjoyed it. Yeah. And it's like a bit weird. Like, in what context could I imagine Dave sitting there making bracelets other than that? You know what I mean? It's so strange,
exactly.
so strange, so crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't imagine me scrambling around on the floor with bits of leather, making, essentially sort of strategic gimp armor. I mean, but I did it, and LARP makes you do crazy things, and
it does, doesn't it?
It's so fun.
That's very strange. Yeah. It does.
Yeah, I mean, like I guess that's the other thing I really like. Going away from, well, not staying crafting a little bit, but like, do you tell people about what you do? Like people who don't LARP, do you kind of talk about it a lot, or?
Well, funnily enough, actually, that's. I was having physio on my knee yesterday, and so I had to tell the physiotherapist how I'd injured my knee. So it's yeah, you can know what's coming. So it's really difficult to tell a physiotherapist that you tripped over a tree root in the middle of woods fighting off orcs dressed as kilos of chainmail. Yeah. So basically, I said, "Oh yeah, I'm a reenactor." I said, "Oh
that's
yes,
what I say. Sometimes it's the easiest way people understand, right? They don't. They can understand reenactment.
Yeah, and it said, "Oh, I said, like medieval." He said, "Oh right, yeah. Is that a bit like LARP?" He said. I said, "Oh right, yeah. You know what that is?" He said, "Yeah, my mate's into it. He plays some dwarf or something in this." And I said, "Oh right, yeah. Well, I was actually laughing. Oh right, okay." And it's actually not as niche as I think it used to be.
Yeah, I think that this is one thing we discovered, and I think the very fact that me and Dave go, I think, is in itself a demonstration of how not as niche it used to be. Like, I think we talked about in a previous podcast, but the idea of that kind of wave of acceptability is not really the right word, but that wave of kind of like, this is something to do has passed over us, right? Suddenly we're inside that realm of people who are engaged in the hobby, and that bubble, if you like, is ever expanding. It feels like more and more people are cool with it, and I guess that's people getting cool with the idea of just geek culture is kind of cool, I guess. But it's just, I think people are just more up for just having fun, right? The idea of going out and doing something fun is great, right? Like, I mean, the whole of society has moved on to that little level. Somewhere, somehow, it's all changed a little bit, incrementally, bit by bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're on with that. I mean, my co-workers, they do know what I do as a hobby. And, I've had a few hobbies in my time. And I, it's not to say that I'll do LARP for 5 or 6 years and then, I might move on to something else. I don't know. I still do Warhammer a bit, and not so much with the role-playing games anymore. But, so, yeah, I think that people, if you'd said to someone, 20 years ago, I play Warhammer, and the first thing they would say is, what's that? You say that to someone now, and they go, oh, that's that tabletop game. It has changed. And I think LARP is getting into that sort of realm where you say LARP to someone and they don't automatically go, what's that? I mean, this physiotherapist I'd never met in my life before. He was
aware of it, right?
He was aware of it. Yeah, he knew about it. He knew someone who did it. And I think that could only be a good thing.
I think we're getting so many more people in the hobby now, and if you look at like something very different, like songs and story time, right? All of the different people who are involved in that, and you're getting people from performance backgrounds who are coming in, and people. With different crafting skills who are coming in, and the documentary that was getting done, all that kind of stuff. People are kind of getting drawn in from different angles now than maybe the traditional angles you would have initially expected.
I love where people bring interesting skills to LARP. So one of the things that I noticed was obviously you get a lot of people who are either into amateur acting or amdram, as it were, and the guys that put on the theatre we went to in the league, oh my god, it was so professional. I mean, I don't know whether these guys were in their outside jobs in theatre or not, but what they actually did and what they put on was just absolutely amazing. And the skill sets of these people that make the world, I wouldn't even say the game, but actually make the world, make it feel so real.
Much more alive, right?
And the set dressing, what you've got to remember is that when you look round Anvil, 95% of what you see is player-owned, player-driven,
and that's probably a low number, right? It's probably more than that. That's how crazy it is. Not just that. Pretty much everything has been taken there by car or cart or whatever, right? Someone's had to traipse it across a field and set it up, and they've gone to the time and the effort of doing it. It's crazy.
A couple in Navarre. I mean, I don't know whether you've been into the Eternal Families tent. There's the big one just outside the woods.
I've actually never been, apart from into like the pubs and stuff. I've never actually been into another player's tent or another group's tent. That's something maybe to do next time. That'd be good fun.
Absolutely, we'll go in there. So I know a few people from that group, but actually, going into that tent for the first time is really difficult. Not because they weren't friendly or welcoming or anything like that, but this isn't my tent.
It's fundamentally right. There's that disconnect.
Yeah. can I actually go in here? And absolutely I could. And they welcomed me in, and I sat down, I had a drink, and it's their group tent, but
That's really
but
cool.
inside they had like benches and tables, and I think the character's name is Twill, he's a broker, and he had a little set of drawers with all little boxes in with all his little the money and all the resources.
Incredible, dude. Some of the stuff that people bring, it just blows my mind. It's just like, where does it all come from?
Exactly. And that set dressing, it's not provided by PD. It's the players who bring this along. The players who are dedicated to doing that makes the game. And I think that's something else that's unique with LARP, rather than, say, an event or a festival. Occasionally you get like what they called like Renaissance fairs sort of thing.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all stalls, and little, it's all themed in sort of medieval theme, but it's all provided by the organisers.
Yeah.
Whereas with Empire, most of it is provided by the players. And you've got to remember that everything you see has been made, a lot of it made, bought and sewn and crafted and painted by the people who are around you. It's not. A lot of it's not commercially bought. You can't actually buy a lot of this stuff. I mean, there's a new little group on the Facebook for crafting. Actually, it's for set dressing and stuff.
Right.
The things that people are making, like making. There's one guy on there who's making a book stand. Like a lectern. You get in a church. He's making this stand for these amazing books, and there are people making like chests of drawers and tables and Viking chairs. And
it just the logistics of it blows my mind, right? Like, how do they get it there, right? Like, my car is full to bursting. I mean, it's a little Vauxhall Gilla, but like, it's like by the time I got the tent and all my stuff in there and things, my car's ready to explode. I mean, I guess people must rent vans and all kinds of stuff, but it's behind each place you go in Empire. There's a crafting story that is, like ours or many times greater, like all those little things that you see, even down to like belts and little sort of thing, ornaments and stuff. All of those are little crafting stories that are just kind of sort of hidden in or woven into Empire and woven into LARP. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there are the main sort of traders, and you can see someone wearing, a belt from the traders, because you can tell.
You can kind of see, yeah. But I don't think that's one of the things, and that sounds like derogatory. Like, but like all of us, I think, you start off at a certain place and then you craft things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the people who go that extra mile and have the sort of fully crafted kit and stuff, they really are awesome, right? Like, some people look incredible.
Yeah. Oh God! I mean, my we call it soft kit, I guess, isn't it? Just day clothes. It's pretty poor, to be quite honest with you.
Mine's bad. Mine's real bad. But it's all on a budget, right? Like, everything is tempered by the money it costs. Yeah.
I mean, my soft kit isn't great. I mean, I guess that's partly because my focus has been in crafting weaponry. But some other people are so good at costume. It makes you cry. You look at some people's kit, and it's just like, how did you do that? It's just haberdashery wizardry, I would call it.
But also, I think everything gets better when you look at it in the context of everything else that surrounds it, right? So seeing one person dressed up as a wizard or whatever is one thing. But when you see that in the context of all the tents and all the things around them and all the other people around them and the battle that's going on around them and the all the stuff that's outside of that, all of a sudden everybody looks awesome through everybody putting a little bit of effort in here and there, and a few people putting loads of effort in. And just different levels, I guess, of, not as effort's the wrong word, but just different levels of things and different styles and stuff. All of a sudden, it just looks incredible. Like, when you look out at the sort of Empire army, or you're just walking down a street, it's just a visual treat often.
It is, yeah. I take my hat off to the people who've, you see, I can't think of them all now, but there's a High Guard order. I don't know what they were called, but they were all in the sort of black, and they had all the same livery on.
Yeah.
And they were sort of marching along together. I just thought to myself, That's so good, and the brass coast as well. You know, you look at the eyes and
The
their
rich
costume,
textures and all that
yeah.
stuff. It just looks so good. And then you sort of thinking, oh man, that must get muddy and horrible, and you have to lay down on a puddle in it, and then you've got to clean
Yeah.
it. But at this,
Yeah.
and you still go for it. You go for it 100%. These
Yeah.
people are incredible. And as you say, I'm in awe of a lot of them.
Yeah, yeah, I love what they do, and I wish that my costuming was half as good as that, you know. But that's not where my skill lies.
Yeah, I mean, we all have and like I buy a lot of my costume, and you know, I commissioned my cloak, for example, and I just love it.
Oh, I
right?
saw
Like,
that. Yeah,
it's just so great. Like for me, it just adds. It doesn't really, and that's the other thing, right? When you start doing stuff for yourself as well, that's all that really matters, right? If you get pleasure from it, it's just, and if it makes you feel a bit more like your character, you feel a bit more confident. Then, or if you're just excited to walk out and wear it. I mean, in what other context am I going to be excited about walking out with a cloak on? Right. Well, I think we'll probably tie it towards some kind of conclusion there. But thank you so much for doing this, Robert. It's been a real pleasure. And
it's been great talking to you. I
really can't wait for E1. I mean, the sort of the long wait between now and then is kind of unbearable. And in many ways, the only thing that gets me through it is the crafting.
I'm super busy with it, so I've got quite a few things on. I haven't got a great deal of room left now before you want to get stuff done for people. So I'm pretty much full. But that keeps me going as well, you know. So
I think it's a great thing to have, actually. In like, as I've mentioned it a bunch of times on the podcast, but I think crafting in downtime is just a really good way to almost kind of keep yourself in the game. And keep your mind busy, and it just, every time I work on it, right, every time I do anything crafty for Empire, it makes me smile, right, and ultimately that's worth all the money, it's worth all the stuff, right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, sometimes you forget it's just 4 events a year. It doesn't seem like that sometimes, does it? You know,
it's kind of all consuming in a way.
It absolutely can be, but it is actually just 4 weekends a year. But I actually talk to so many people on the Facebook every single day. Yeah. It doesn't feel like that. So exactly. I love it.
Oh, dude, well, I can't wait to see you again. And thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you again soon.
Aha! Looks like he's returning. Perfect timing.
What do you know? It was here in my pocket all along.
Really?
Now then, if I just open up this pin here and pop the crystal in there. Ha! Got it.
Got it indeed. Would you look at that? The light. It's so bright, I can't.